Right guys, welcome back to the psychodynamic approach. This is part 2, and in this video we are going to be looking at a couple of evaluation points and then finish off with some exam questions that have come up in the past, just so that you can see what could get asked about this topic. Like I said, this is part 2 of the psychodynamic approach, so if you haven't seen part 1 yet and you need to go over the outline again, then the link to that video should be appearing on your screen now, so you can go ahead and check that out before you watch this one. So let's get started. We'll start with the strength of the psychodynamic approach, and that is that it has a great ability to explain human behaviour. Now, although the psychodynamic approach is generally considered fairly controversial and bizarre at times, it has had a huge influence on Western psychology and kind of Western contemporary thought. And it was a key force in psychology for the first half of the 20th century alongside behaviorism. It's been used to explain a wide range of disorders, conditions, phenomena, for example, personality development, abnormal behavior, moral development, gender identity. There's loads and loads of stuff that the psychodynamic approach has got involved with. It also draws attention to the connection between childhood experiences, such as our relationships to our parents, and our later development, which is something that at the time theories had never done before. So that was really, really important for the psychodynamic approach. So all of that suggests that the psychodynamic approach has had a positive impact on psychology and also on things like literature and art and other human endeavours. Moving on, another strength of the psychodynamic approach is that it has practical application. Okay, so the psychodynamic approach introduced the idea of psychotherapy, and it brought to the world a new form of therapy called psychoanalysis, which was one of the first attempts to treat mental disorders psychologically rather than physically, which is how it had been attempted to be treated up until that point. It's also the forerunner to a lot of modern-day talking therapies like counselling that have since been established, and so it really did lay the foundations for the types of psychotherapy that are seen commonly these days. Although, to be fair, psychoanalysis is still used today, and it is still something that is commonly sought out by people who want some psychotherapy. It uses a range of techniques that are designed to access the unconscious, such as dream analysis, and psychoanalysis generally claims to be able to help clients by bringing their repressed emotions into their conscious mind so that they can be dealt with. So this emergence of a new form of therapy, psychoanalysis, shows the value in the psychodynamic approach because it did create a new approach to treatment and it did create a new way of helping people. However, that being said, there is a counterpoint to this practical application, and that is that as much as Freudian therapists have claimed success with many clients with neuroses, mild neuroses, psychoanalysis is generally regarded as inappropriate or even harmful for people who experience more serious mental disorders. For example, people with schizophrenia often experience things like paranoia and delusional thinking, which means that those people with schizophrenia have lost their grip on reality, and that means that they generally won't be able to articulate their thoughts in the way that's very often required by psychoanalysis. So that suggests that Freudian therapy and theory may not be applicable to all mental disorders, but only those that have more of a mild condition. And then as a final limitation, we have the issue of falsifiability. Now, one problem of the psychodynamic approach is that many of its core concepts are simply very, very abstract and they're not testable. So this kind of brings us to the work of Karl Popper, who argued that the approach doesn't meet the scientific criteria of falsification. Now, falsification means that it's not open to empirical testing and it's not possible to be proved wrong. And that's a really big thing because all scientific theories and disciplines have to be open to the possibility of being disproved. They have to be able to be empirically tested. And that's just not possible with the psychodynamic approach, because concepts like the id and the ego and the Oedipus complex and defense mechanisms, they all happen on an unconscious level, which make them impossible to test, because how are you supposed to test something that's unconscious? You're not even aware that it's there or that you're using it. And so testing it is really, really difficult. Also, his ideas are based on single individuals, such as people like Little Hans or Anna O. And feel free to Google who those people were, but effectively Freud used case studies, which makes it really difficult for him to be able to make universal claims about human behaviour, because the reality is his theory is based on the study of a couple of unique individuals rather than large-scale samples. So, according to Popper, that makes the psychodynamic approach more of a pseudoscience, which effectively means a fake science rather than a real science. And that is a limitation of this particular approach. Okay, so just as a quick recap, here were the evaluation points in brief. You've got your practical application with your counterpoint, your falsifiability, and your explanatory power. Now, just to be clear, I've changed the order on this slide compared to how I presented them. That's simply because this is the order that I personally would learn them in. Obviously, it goes without saying, ideally you would learn all of these points in order to try and push up to a top band mark in an essay. However, if you don't feel like you can learn all of them, then this is the order that I would prioritize them. So I'd start with the practical application and the counterpoint, simply because it is a nice chunky evaluation point if you use both of those together, and that will definitely get you marks. The falsifiability one is another really nice limitation to have, because it simply covers everything in the psychodynamic approach, and it is something that you could get asked about in research methods as well. So there's a nice link there to another topic. The explanatory power evaluation point is also a nice evaluation point, and it is also a useful evaluation point. However, it is the one that I would leave out if you are likely to struggle to remember all of them. So, just to finish off then, let's have a look at how this has come up in an exam so far, just so that you know what could come your way. So, just to start us off, we've got a couple of standard bread and butter short answer questions. Describe the structure of personality according to the psychodynamic approach is obviously referring to the id, the ego, and the superego. Briefly evaluate defense mechanisms as a way of explaining human behavior and experience. Okay, that would be a nice little opportunity to use your falsification evaluation point, because defense mechanisms happen unconsciously. Outline one limitation of the psychodynamic approach. Again, you've got two to choose from. You can use your falsification evaluation point, or you could reword the counterpoint a little bit and use that instead. It all kind of depends on how many marks it's worth. And these three questions could come up for somewhere between 2 and 6 marks, potentially. So describe the structure of personality is likely to be 4 or 6. The one limitation of the psychodynamic approach could be anywhere between 2 and 4, and briefly evaluate defense mechanisms could also be anywhere between 2 and 4. Okay, so that's kind of one way in which you could get it. Obviously, you could get essays as well. That goes without saying, and I'm not going to put an essay title up here for you because everyone kind of knows what an essay title looks like. You've also got some application bits. So obviously part A in this one is just outline a psychodynamic explanation for the development of the superego. So that's going to want you to talk about things like the resolution of the Oedipus complex and the internalization of the morals and values of your same-sex parent, which then ultimately leads to the development of the superego. You've then got this application section that follows on directly from it. So again, you'd be looking at talking about how the superego kind of wants us to follow this ideal moralistic standard, and that it would be making us feel guilty for wanting to steal the t-shirt, and so on and so on. Okay, and then a final one is this one. Identify and explain the defense mechanism that Jed was displaying. Okay, so he's displaying displacement because he is taking out his anger, he's transferring his feelings from the true source, which is obviously the teacher, or the fact that he got a detention, and he's transferring those feelings from that source onto a substitute target, which is the locker. Now, this question could come up as a 2 marker, but it's more likely to come up as a 3 or a 4 marker because, as the question says, it wants you to identify it, which will be 1 mark, and then explaining the defense mechanism could be anywhere between 2 and 3 marks. So you're looking at a 3 or 4 marker in total for this question. Okay? So I hope that's been useful. I hope all of those have made sense. Please put any questions that you might have into the comment section below, and I will do my best to get back to you ASAP. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.